bison that we have to forgive the unforgivable. And there are many that have, and there are many that have yet to do that. And only when we forgive the unforgivable can we really say that we are healing, that we have addressed that one aspect of our life and saying we can forgive. Now we can heal. And we have to remember that there is a great deal of something called hope that is a part of our very being as Chama as indigenous peoples, that there is always the hope for tomorrow, that the women today have the hope of becoming wonderful, beautiful mothers who care for their bodies, who bring healthy babies to live with us, who teach them what it is to be good-hearted people, who create those healthy homes and environments, and who educate them in the right ways, and the right ways being in a bicultural sense, because we know where we live in 21st century America, that there is a dominant society out there. We now have to be bicultural individuals, but we must never ever forget who we are and pay attention to developing our very being and in the cultural context, and that be balanced, that we be balanced individuals who live in harmony with the time and space in which we live. And that there is goodness in life. Yes, it has changed dramatically. But our grandparents knew that there was change. They knew that the seasons changed. They watched, they observed, and they know that change is a part of life. And that once we accept that, then we can make those changes within as well. But those changes begin within. Each one of us has a responsibility to accept the fact, make those changes within each of us individually. We have control over those. We have control over ourselves as women, as mothers, as fathers, as men. And so we need to go back to our age-old teachings of knowing that we live with change, and that change begins within, and that it can replicate itself into healthy communities, into healthy nations, and once more, again, into strong families. And so it is beautiful and wonderful to be a mother, but it is a very awesome responsibility, to say the least, because the life and the cultures of the people are held in the hands of mothers. But it is a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful reward to see our children grow and mature toward adulthood, and to become skillful and knowledgeable, and have the knowledge to pass on to the other generations. So I have told you about the medicine wheel and the life of a woman from before birth to the point now where she's become an elder and has strengthened herself spiritually to make that final step from life to death. So, and our men need to be healing too. But since the woman is responsible for the well-being of the home and for the cultures, then she too has a very necessary need, and it's critical for the woman, the mother, to heal. And when she heals, then her family's going to heal, and the community's going to heal, and the nation is going to heal too. And so we need to make sure that our women are in that healing stage of their life, that they know that the well-being of our very nations rests with her. Even the Northern Cheyennes have that wonderful proverb, and I probably will not get it straight, that a nation is not conquered until the hearts of its women are on the ground. Then it is done, no matter how strong the warriors or how strong the weapons. Say to my younger daughters in institutions, that they are there for reasons placed upon them by cultures, differing ways of life, differing customs and traditions, whether it's the use of drugs of any kind, including alcohol, uh, living in a society that has a differing cultural value system that places a great deal of emphasis upon material culture as opposed to uh, looking at the material worth of an individual. And I am saddened to know that there are many of my daughters in prison, but I am also very heartened and take knowledge in the fact that, above all, that they must have the desire to come back home and to reassume their responsibilities as Indian women, as mothers, as those that carry the culture, who have the responsibility to build strong families. They are, they are obviously have been institutionalized because the cultural values and the norms are different. I do know that many of them are in institutions just because of alcoholism. There are others that are there because of more other crimes. Um, but I don't want them to give up hope. I want them to be very hopeful of coming back home and to taking their place in their families, their communities, and their nations, and just demonstrating their goodness of heart, their goodness of mind, their potential, the fact that we can start all over again. We can be given new names. We can go through ceremonies. We can go through our renewal ceremonies. We can go to sweat lodges. We have our own cultural ways of reintegrating people back into our society, whether it is attending sweats, attending language classes, taking online courses, uh, but placing a great deal of emphasis upon that part of our lives that the schools have neglected and tried to eradicate. I want them to know that it's going to be their behavior that is going to demonstrate their goodness and their desire to be very good contributing members of their communities and families and nations. Well, I believe you have discerned in my discussion the importance of education whenever the child in the early years of the life has to learn discipline. That's a part of education. They have to, and at the same time, they're being sort of placed in an environment where they're absorbing all of life around them, the language, the cultural beliefs, and so forth. So education, even in childhood, is exceptionally important. And as the person ages to being a younger person, where education in the formal context then comes into play from our cultural perspective, that our ancestors have always placed a great deal of value upon education, even if as you advance into adulthood, that education becomes very, it's supplied. It's sort of, and if you look at the elders and their passing on, we've always placed a great deal of value upon what we call lifelong education, and or humanistic education as it is called. But education in the non-Indian sense, when you go to school and come out with a degree of some kind, whether it's an associate's degree, which of course uh, has is being emphasized in tribal colleges around the country. Education becomes very important in educating for our respective communities. But we put a great deal of value from a cultural and a traditional sense upon education. So we go out to mainstream institutions to get these degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees, and you just never seem to quit. But it is very important because we look today at education as the key that's going to open doors for change, for a better environment, to empower ourselves, to help empower the community so that, and in that sense, I put a great deal of emphasis upon service. And I believe White Bison calls it, when you reach that stage past your degrees, of servant leadership or working in the communities to take that education that you've acquired in the process of getting a degree of some type and put it into play in the respective communities and to empower other people. I believe that that is the reason for education, one of the reasons that we go to get those degrees. In the tribal college movement, for example, many of the presidents are American Indian women, Native women. You can just name them. They are the ones that are building and leading tribal colleges. You stop and look at many women leaders that are chairmen or presidents of their tribes, and some of them chief. Wilma Mankiller, I think, probably is probably the best known of all of them. But what you we should be aware of is that education is a good thing. It is something that our ancestors have always emphasized, and we need to have those degrees to become very competent in the areas that the society, non-Indian society in which we live places a great deal of emphasis upon. But we need that kind of education to come back into our various organizations to work at a very practical level, to be our own CEOs, to be our own executive directors, to be our presidents, to be our own accountants, to be our own trainers, to be our own curriculum developers, our own that design the plans that are going to help to empower communities to be healthy, to help them to change, so that education is very important. And fathers now need to understand that they too need to be educated, that they not leave this to the women, because we need to make sure that we balance those head of household roles, that role of the head of household not be left to Native women alone. And so education is good, and education can be good if we stop and look at it as a means to empower ourselves, to help empower communities, and to make those necessary changes to strengthen the life that our ancestors enjoyed. Sure, it was not a utopian life, but it's much better than today, because we did not have to deal with the kinds of issues that confront our young people today. And we had psychological means of dealing with them too, in terms of young people, if they didn't follow the cultural norms. But we didn't have institutions like prisons to send them off to forget about them. We rehabilitated our own. Among Cheyenne people, if a Cheyenne murdered another murderer, they were sent into exile. And they were sent into exile, decided by the chiefs, from 4 to 10 years. And if they lived through, in earlier times, through that 4 to 10 year period, then they could return to the tribe, and they were reintegrated in every way. They were given a new lodge to live in, clothing, cultural items. The only thing that they could never do anymore was just smoke a pipe. with the chiefs. They could never smoke a pipe anymore, but they could do everything else. And so there are some that said that even in a more traditional system would never drink from a cup from which a murderer had drunk. We valued life. We still valued life, and to be removed from the life of a community for committing, let's say, intertribal murder, was the worst sentence that any person could undergo. I mean, you dealt with abnormal behavior of our young people, whatever it was. But if you were exiled from the community, that banishment was just tantamount to death. But if you lived through that and came back, then you became a member of the community again, and were reintegrated and accepted once more as a member of the community. It's just again that there were some of those that, if we stop and look at the sacredness of breath and life, and they certainly haven't talked about this kinship that we have to everything, but the sacredness of breath. There were those that never wanted to be in close contact with a murderer where they would share that breath of life. And so there were these two women on the reservation who came from a family that had an intertribal murder on it. And if they went into town, they wore these big hats with these veils hanging over them so that people didn't see them and didn't breathe that breath of life that had been contaminated in the process of someone in the family having committed intertribal murder. I mean, we place a great deal of value on life. I mean, everything that we do is oriented toward life. Our ceremonies to living to, and so that again, those are the kinds of cultural values and beliefs that mothers have to be very much aware of in terms of teaching their children and how they live and become the best that they can possibly be. It is, to me, I feel almost an inhuman goal for me to attain, just to become a good Cheyenne woman. But I just try. I continue to try. It is so hard. But there are others that have been good Cheyenne women before me, and I just try to be like them. I try to be like my great-grandmother, White Buffalo Woman. She was born in 1852, and she died in 1938, so she and I had 4 years together. I don't remember it, but I know she must have taught me well. And our elders have an exceptionally critical role in helping to reestablish healthy communities. And there are some, unfortunately, whose experience in boarding schools has more or less directed them away from that role. What has to happen is they need to have the kind of training, again, in their cultural ways as a people, to begin to develop again a very strong cadre of elders that are going to pass on the knowledge and the ways to the people. Elders have the responsibility of living and of being in such a way that they represent the stability of all the generations. They have to provide that stability. They have to provide that knowledge. They have to live those ways. They have to teach those ways that say our ways as a people worked for a long period of time. It's only in the most recent generations that has broken down, because we as elders have traditionally and since creation accepted our roles and responsibilities for teaching our ways to the younger generations, and that was broken down. And so now we need to make sure that the elders have the kind of training in terms of knowledge, in terms of points of view, in terms of the importance of renewing our cultural connections. And so that those cultural connections are so important because without culture, without language, then we don't exist as viable communities. Again, we need to be very proactive about relearning our languages, uh, relearning our cultural values, and in a traditional frame of reference, the elders that represent that repository of knowledge and wisdom, that traditional knowledge, and so that we need to make sure again that we strengthen those in that particular age group to function in that role, to provide that kind of cultural stability and that kind of hope encompassed in it to all of those coming around. For all of the young women in prison and wherever they are. Okay. It's an everything song. Right. Hey ya, hey ya, hey yo, ay 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 yo, hey ya, hi ya, ho. Yo, hi ya, hey yo, hi ya, hey yo, hi ya, hey yo, hi ya, hey yo, hi ya. Yo, hi ya, hey yo, hi yo, hey yo, hey yo, hi ya, 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 hey ya, oh, ya.